Hi.
Hello. We have waves. We are good.
Yep.
Hi, Nick.
Oh, shoot. I forgot to hit the record button. I'm so sorry. I just hit it, though. So I'm recording now.
You're not professional like we are.
Nope. I'm such a dingus. All right. Off to a great start.
So, yeah, Nick is talking Nier with Richie and I today. And thanks again for coming on again, Nick.
Thanks for having me.
It's always awesome to have you on.
It's always awesome to be on.
Richie, can you tell everyone what we're talking about today?
That's a very good question. Because you wanted to talk about Nier, but you've only played Nier Automata. So you wanted to talk about, like, the whole Nier series, which is itself kind of a minefield, because as we were discussing, there's stuff in Nier that relates to another series called Drakengard, and there's stuff in Nier Automata that calls back to Nier. But also, I think those three things stand perfectly fine on their own. And, like, the connections between Drakengard and Nier are, like, it's basically an Easter egg. It's not, like, a super important detail. And, yeah. And I would actually go as far as to say that I think Nier Automata works better as a standalone story than it does as the sequel to Nier, because there's a lot of stuff in Automata that it was in the original Nier, and I think if you don't know the backstory behind it, you get a different impression of it that I think is more interesting than if you just, like, know what it is.
And if you've played through Nier, you know to call into question certain aspects of the basic premise of Nier Automata, because they don't jive with what happened.
Yeah.
Like, the bit about humans going to the moon, that's inconsistent with what happens in the original Nier.
We should point out as well that, like, Nier Automata is, like, it's the sequel to Nier, but it is, like, what, 5,000 years in the future, almost?
At least.
Something in that vicinity. Yeah, it's like a very, 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 like, it's not, like, the next day. No. So much can have changed. Yeah.
So what was the first game in this series of games that somehow relates to Nier Automata, whether it's an Easter egg or not?
In terms of narrative chronological order, it's Drakengard 3, which is a prequel to Drakengard 1. That didn't quite fit together perfectly with Drakengard 1, so they had to retcon it a little bit in the manga, but that's just a taste of how convoluted this universe is.
What?
So yeah.
And how is that connected to Nier Automata?
Well, it basically Drakengard 3 and then Drakengard 1 lead up to kind of the pivotal event that causes the white chlorination syndrome that wipes everybody out in Nier, which sort of then sets the stage for Nier Automata to occur way in the future.
Yeah,
Richie?
what he said. Basically what happens is that at one of the endings of Drakengard 3, how many endings does that thing have? Is it just
Drakengard 3 has 4. Drakengard 1 has 5 or 6.
4 endings. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, that's actually quite restrained compared to what we're going to see
because
later
Nier Automata has 26.
Yes. One of the endings of Drakengard 3, a dragon thing appears in the real world. Like, that's as much as you need to know, basically. A dragon thing shows up from the Drakengard universe into our universe, and that is the beginning of, like, that's sort of the impetus behind what becomes the plot of Nier. But again, it's not super important that you know that. Basically, like, Nier begins with this, like, horrible disaster called like white chlorination poisoning or something.
Are we talking about Nier Automata?
No. This is the thing. This is why I said this is going to be a mess.
Well, I mean,
basically, the starting point of the original Nier is there's a thing called white chlorination poisoning that is like this sort of world-ending event that kicks off the story. If you go deep into, like, what is going on in the original Nier, the explanation behind white chlorination poisoning is basically it's the end. It's what happens after ending 4 of Drakengard 3.
Okay, Richie, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. You keep saying the original Nier. Is that Nier Gestalt?
Yes.
Or
No, Nier. Okay.
Well,
Oh god.
Can you just tell me
Well,
what
here's
the Niers are?
Well, here's the thing. Like, there are basically, when we say Nier, it's sort of a composite reference to
Yeah.
two games, Nier Gestalt and Nier Replicant. They're basically the same
Okay.
game. The only difference is, in one, Nier is an older man looking after his daughter. In the other, Nier is a younger man looking after his sister. The relationship between those two is the only difference. Otherwise, they're identical in terms of gameplay and story.
Yeah, my boyfriend told me about the game where in one of them he's like hunky and in another one he's not.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, well, even the old man
I
is.
think he's hunky
yeah,
in both
even
of
the
them.
old man has.
You think he's hunky in both of them?
He's got Gascoigne energy.
He does.
Well, I should play it now.
He kind of looks like Gascoigne without the beard too, but that's another matter.
Yeah.
But I you know what? I could probably just kind of run through Drakengard kind of quick just to set the stage, and then we can spend more time on Nier if that
good,
works.
Good thinking. Yeah, it works.
Because chronologically, the first game is Drakengard 3, which is again the sort of imperfect prequel to Drakengard that they had to retcon a little bit to make fit with the original game, even after they made Drakengard 3, because Yoko Taro is clinically insane. And that's sort of a premise. Yoko Taro is the director of the games we're talking about, and just to keep in mind the fact that he's clinically insane in the best possible way. To kind of understand the way these games work.
Nick, can he sue you for saying that?
Well, I said in the best possible. It's a compliment to say that his highly eccentric style of storytelling makes these games something unique. That's what I mean.
Yeah. And like we should point out that Yoko Taro is he started off. I think he was a playwright to begin with, and then he moved into video games.
Matter of fact, there's a
on.
stage play prequel to Nier Automata.
Yeah.
That kind of tells some of the backstory of A2, which we can get to later. Starting with Drakengard 3. There's this fantasy world called Midgard in which most of the events take place, and Midgard came into
Midgard?
Yeah, Midgard.
Isn't that like the Norse world?
It is.
Yes.
But they went with that name for the fantasy setting of Drakengard for reasons that escape me. They just
Can Thor sue them?
For just using the name? Probably not. It's hard to trademark the name of a place.
Okay.
Also, I imagine it's out of copyright.
Yeah. You can't copyright like the name of a place, and it's not a trademark. I don't think of Norse mythology. So so Thor couldn't unfortunately sue, but he could just beat him up with his hammer. So that's a consolation prize. Then he'd commit battery, but who's going to sue the god of thunder? We talked about the problems with suing deities in the last podcast.
It's true.
They don't have to show up to court. But in this world, way long time ago, an earthquake takes place on the Iberian Peninsula, and after this, all sorts of magical creatures appear. Magic itself was introduced into the world. A city appears out of nowhere called Cathedral City, and dragons appear and start waging war on humanity. Everything falls into chaos until these 5 beings called the Intoners appear and kind of set everything right. But before the Intoners appear, because of the havoc and the chaos that the dragons create, the disparate nations of Europe come together and form this one nation called Midgard, with the new city, which is called the Cathedral City, as its kind of capital. But it's a feudal system, so it's a system of disparate feudal lords, and they're oppressing and taking advantage of the people until these 5 quote goddesses called the Intoners come and kind of set things right. But during the feudal era, before the Intoners show up, a young girl is sold into prostitution by her mother, and to escape prostitution, she turns to violence and theft. And she grows to hate the world, and so she keeps stealing and killing until the world finally, her goal is to keep stealing and killing until the world finally musters the wherewithal to stop her and put her down. She has got a real violent disposition because of the things she's been through. So she escapes prostitution, but she's eventually captured, imprisoned, and tortured along with, I think, 5 other girls. She's the last one to survive, but she's got a disease that's on the verge of killing her until a strange flower appears to her and gives her a new lease on life and gives her great supernatural power. And so this initially seems like a good thing for our young heroine, whose name is Zero. She despises herself, so she calls herself Zero because she sees herself as less than nothing. I'm not sure you ever learned her real name. So this flower seems like a good thing, but initially she comes to empathize with the flower, which has its own will, and she realizes that its only goal is to destroy humankind, and it needs a human host to do that. And so she tries to remove the flower from her body, and it paralyzes her and prevents her from doing it. She tries to kill herself to stop the flower, but it won't let her die. And out of resentment, it severs certain aspects of her personality and of her powers and creates these 5 female beings called Intoners. And these are the Intoners who use the magical power of song to kind of end the feudal system and bring order to Midgard. But these are just vessels for the flower to destroy the world. Zero knows this. And so at some point, Zero makes a pact with a dragon, because in this universe, humans can make pacts with creatures. And both will, have increased powers because of it, but usually it comes at a price to the human, but Zero doesn't seem to pay a price because she's not altogether human anymore, I guess, because of the influence of the flower. Matter of fact, the flower is the cause of the pact system, but we don't need to get into that. It's too granular for what we're doing. And so Zero sets out to kill the 5 intoners, whom she refers to as her sisters, because they all came from the flower, which is part of her. She makes a pact with a dragon named Michael. They launch an attack against the cathedral city, and it ends in miserable defeat. Because the 5 intoners are all named 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, quite creatively. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And of course, Zero, their mother/sister, is named Zero. Which the Japanese have this thing where 0 is preeminent over 1, I think. So it's like 0 is like the first, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So if you're counting, you'd start with 0 instead of 1 in a lot of context in the Japanese. But anyway, so 0 came first, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 is kind of the leader of the 5 intoners. And she has her own dragon named Gabriel, who is kind of a beast, and he kills Michael. And
it's like the angels. Gabriel, Michael.
Yeah, these dragons are named after angels. As a matter of fact, in Drakengard, the dragon's name is Angelus, which literally translates to angel from Latin. So it's a thing. And of course, angels are a separate species of creature in Drakengard. They're basically in this game, they're basically summon monsters. You can summon them. They play a bigger role in Drakengard. But the 5 intoners, each one has a disciple. So each one has a disciple except for one, who doesn't appear to have one. But she has a big dragon, so it's okay. And her dragon comes and kills Michael, critically wounds Zero, but Zero escapes. But Michael reincarnates in the form of this other dragon called Mikhail, who's kind of a young, naive, kind of clumsy personality that Zero kind of resents and despises, but she nevertheless stays with him. So she's pretty down after her defeat, and she stays holed up for about a year, and then she decides to set out to kill her sisters. Which she does one by one, and takes their disciples as she kills them. And eventually, it's just to kind of back up, the only way to kill an intoner or anyone touched by the flower is with a dragon. Like the dragons and the flower are naturally antagonistic to each other because only the dragons can destroy the flower. So Zero is running around killing her sisters with a sword made of dragon bone, under the theory that will kill them because they've been touched by the flower. Of course, that could kill her too, because she's also an intoner, basically, because of the flower's influence. So she cuts her way through her sisters and takes their disciples and eventually confronts one. And in ending A, there's a big battle between Michael and Gabriel and Zero and 1, and it eventually ends that 1 is killed and Zero is ready to die, because the nature of Zero's pact with Michael was that after all the sisters were dead, Michael would kill her. And Mikhail sort of inherited that pact because Mikhail is Michael reincarnated, basically, but without Michael's memories. Like dragons can reincarnate when they die, but when they do, they lose all their memories, so they're effectively a different personality. But as the game progresses, you see Michael sort of coming out, and Mikhail matures and becomes more like Michael. So at the very end, after everybody's dead, including actually Mikhail, because he has to sacrifice himself to kill Gabriel, Zero is mysteriously stabbed in the back by this young boy who looks just like 1. And we'll call him Brother 1, because he's essentially a clone of 1, made from 1's rib, kind of paralleling the Adam and Eve story, which is another theme in Nier Automata. So she's stabbed in the back and killed with a dragon bone sword by this guy named Brother 1. And that's basically the ending of Route A. B and C don't matter. The real important one is Route D, which has a different series of events leading up to the final confrontation, but it kind of turns out the same way. All the intoners are dead. But this time, Mikhail survives. He doesn't have to sacrifice himself. And Zero is at a point where the flower is taking over, and it eventually sprouts into this huge flower that covers, multiple city blocks, and out of each petal, a representation of one of the intoners sprouts up, and at the center, a representation of Zero sprouts up. And Mikhail's job is to destroy the big flower once and for all. And the boss fight is basically Guitar Hero. It's a rhythm game. If you play Guitar Hero, you know exactly it not visually, but mechanically, it works just like Guitar Hero. The big flower is singing a song, and you have to hit the right buttons at the right times to produce musical notes to counteract that. And then once you do that, the massive flower basically disintegrates. And this android called Accord, who's been kind of watching everything, she states that the power of the flower is not destroyed, but it's contained in another dimension. And it may resurface one day. And that sort of sets the stage for Drakengard 1. I think Drakengard 1 really follows ending D, which we just discussed. But I mentioned ending A because it's the only one in which you see Brother 1, the male clone of 1. And the reason I mention him is because he starts the Church of the Watchers, which is relevant to the story of Drakengard. Make sense so far?
Yep.
Oh yeah, perfect sense.
In as much as Yoko Taro worked.
Yeah, it sounds like a very dark and twisted game.
Oh, it is. And in Drakengard, you've got a protagonist who's a homicidal maniac. You've got him implicitly having incense with his sister. He teams up with a pedophile and a cannibal and a young boy.
Okay, I think like to clarify like what's kind of going on here.
Yeah.
The idea that Taro was getting at with Drakengard is in video games, you play as a character who like they can't ever really be a good person because they murder so many people throughout the course of the game.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what he's trying to get at in Drakengard is okay, like the only people who could really be like a typical action game protagonist in real life would be like the most like revolting people alive.
That's right.
So they're all just like psychopaths and pedophiles and things.
Because most games gloss over the fact that you are killing legions of people to achieve your goals.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And Yoko Taro's like, well, I want you to acknowledge what you're doing. You know. So it's not total lunacy. There's a method to it, and plus he was rebelling against a lot of the common tropes of the day, like the damsel in distress trope and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He was sick of seeing a lot of the same narrative devices used over and over, naively glossed over. So he wanted to kind of make you confront these things and kind of rebel against those. So I mean, there were legitimate reasons for some of the decisions that he made. It's just I thought it was a way to kind of grab people's attention, talking about homicidal maniacs and pedophiles and cannibals, all of which are present in Drakengard. So all this kind of sets the stage for Drakengard 1. We refer to these beings called angels, which in Drakengard 3 are basically summon monsters, but they play a more active role in Drakengard. Because essentially they are instruments of the gods created to destroy humanity, and that's what they're trying to do. But somewhere along the way, the Church of the Watchers, also known as the Church of the Angels, initially established by Brother 1, created these 4 seals that sort of keep the Watchers at bay. But if the seals are ever broken, then these things called the Seeds of Resurrection, also known as the Seeds of Destruction, will manifest in the world, and the Watchers will also be able to enter the world uninhibited. And that will set in motion multiple alternative ways for humanity to be destroyed. You know? Because one way for humanity to be destroyed would be for any human to enter one of the seeds and emerge as this superpowered being who can reproduce at a geometric rate and destroy the human race. Another way is for the Watchers to come in along with their mother goddess, the Queen Beast, and destroy the world that way. So if the seals are broken, multiple alternative events, chains of events will set into motion, one of which will inevitably result in humankind's destruction. You know? So
Yeah.
it's because I think the gods have decided that humankind is a failed experiment and want to wipe us out. That's basically it. And that was, I think, the flower's purpose as well. But the flower failed in Drakengard 3, but we'll see that the flower makes a return, I think, in Drakengard. So we start off with our protagonist, Kaim. Midgard is basically broken off into 2 factions, the Empire and the Union, and they're at war with each other. The Empire is run by the Church of the Watchers. Now, initially, the Church of the Watchers are the ones who put the seal in place to keep the Watchers back and keep the Seeds of Resurrection back. But they have had a change of heart. The Watchers have come to influence the leader of the Church of the Watchers, who is a direct descendant of Brother 1, and she is a child. Her name is Mana. You know, it's pronounced just like Secret of Mana.
Yeah.
And you find out later that she's actually possessed by a Watcher. And so the Watchers now have basically taken control of the Church and the Empire. And so now the Church's goal is to destroy the very seals that they created to keep the Watchers and the Seeds at bay. And so the Empire is waging war to that end. And 3 of the seals are just these places that have been imbued with a magical seal, but the 4th seal is a person called the Goddess of the Seal. And that person, I guess, changes every so often. And in this game, it so happens that the Goddess of the Seal is a person called Furia, who is the sister of our protagonist, Kaim. And so when it starts off, the Union, the Empire, is attacking the castle where Fury is holed up, and Kaim is hacking and slashing his way to reach her. And so, you're Kaim, and you're fighting, and you're this superhuman soldier. You're just killing, guys left and right, even though you've been, quote-unquote, mortally wounded. It doesn't seem to hold you back, really. So after you suffer this mortal wound, you kill hundreds of dudes to get to this dragon who's chained and nailed to the floor. You make a pact with her. And one function of the pact is that if you're near death, you get a new lease on life. Both the beast and the human get enhanced capabilities, but the human has to pay a price. And Kaim's price is he can't speak anymore after the pact is made. He gets this really wicked tattoo on his tongue to reflect that his tongue is under seal now and he can't speak. So most of the game, you're playing with the silent protagonist. Although in ending C, the pact is broken and he can speak, and you think he's going to say this really profound thing, but it's basically, I am Kaim! Like, I am Groot! It's like, okay, this is what my protagonist has to say after being silent for the whole game. But anyway, that's ending C. Ending C is not relevant, as Richard pointed out earlier. It's basically ending E we're concerned about.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you hack and slash your way to the dragon, you make a pact with the dragon, and that sets the stage for some really spectacular aerial battles, which are probably the highlight of the game in terms of gameplay. The ground combat's pretty monotonous. You hit square, and you hit square some more. And you hit square some more, and every now and again you cast a spell, and you hit square some more.
It plays a lot like the Warriors games, but kind of jankier.
Yeah, exactly. The gameplay's a bit clunky and repetitive, but the story is compelling.
Yeah, which is a recurring thing until we get to Automata.
Yeah, the gameplay in all the games kind of suffers a bit until Automata, where the combat finally feels good. The gameplay's finally a good experience.
Yeah.
But Nier is kind of a step above Drakengard, but that's not saying a lot.
Yeah.
That's like going from like a D to a C+ or something. Whereas I'd give Nier Automata an A, because the gameplay is just spectacular. But anyway, kind of getting back to Drakengard. So we make our way to Furia, and she's there with a man called Inuit. Inuit is kind of a bard. He's really good at playing songs and singing, but he's weak in terms of combat. And he hates this about himself. Because Kaim is this, super-powered soldier who can cut through hundreds of men with a mortal wound and not even think about it. Whereas all Inuit can do is sit there and play his songs. He's like, I wish I had the strength. I wish I had the strength. All I can do is play these freaking songs. So that's kind of a recurring theme, upcoming antagonist alert, by the way, because of his inferiority complex over his weakness. And so, you get to the castle, and you get to Furia, and Inuit thinks it'd be a good idea to go to this elf village, because the castle isn't safe any longer. So you murder your way to the elf village and find that the elf village has been sacked and burned. And that's where Inuit laments that he's not strong, and Furia says, but your songs comfort me. And as it turns out, before Furia became the goddess of the seal, those two were engaged to be married. And so now that she's the goddess of the seal, they can't be married, but he still, pines after her and stays by her side. At this point, a person named Verdale, who's kind of the head of the Union, reaches out to Angelus and says, bring Furii to the desert, because it's not safe anywhere anymore. So Inuit and Furii head to the desert, but Kaim and Angelus gather intelligence that the Union is taking hostages to this other place somewhere off in the woods, so they murder their way there only to find that there's no one there. So after this completely pointless excursion, we finally go to the to the desert to try to hook up with Furii and what's his face? Inuit. I keep saying what's his face because he seems like an unimportant character initially, but there's a cool fight with him at the end. But anyway. So the gang finds Inuit at the desert, but learns that Verdale, again, the head of the Union, has been taken to an Empire prison, just like virtually every protagonist in the game. It eventually winds up in Empire custody at some point. So we go to that prison, we rescue Verdale, but, Mario, your princess, is in another castle. We find Inuit's being held elsewhere. He's being brainwashed by an evil watcher with horrible voice acting. It's like... because the watcher will try to put words in your mind, and the voice acting sounds just like this. Fury Eye. And this is the voice acting from the evil watcher spirit that you hear throughout the game. An Oscar-worthy performance.
Well, listen, Richie and I have been watching a lot of bad movies.
Yeah.
So This isn't the worst we've heard.
No, I guess not. I mean, that voice actor is capable of much better due to his other performance in animated shows. So he must have been told to deliver the lines just that way.
It's ironic.
Yeah.
Well, that's the explanation for Metroid Other M.
Ah, well, yeah.
Yeah.
You're told to deliver.
Yeah, they want. Apparently, the director wanted her to sound like she'd been through a traumatic experience,
which is totally counter to everything we had preconceived about Samus up to that point.
Let's not go back there.
Makes me sad. We'll just say Other M.
We should have an episode on Other M.
We did.
Yeah.
No, we had Metroidvania episode. We didn't have Other
Well,
M
you'll be
episode.
happy to know that Other M has an option called Theater Mode, where the game just shows you all the cutscenes in order, and like.
Are you serious?
Yes, and then like,
That's
and
awesome.
it inserts little like gameplay footage in between them, so you can follow where you went.
Yeah.
So the game itself makes a lore video for you.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
More games should do that. This is brilliant.
Well, I mean, they tried to humanize Samus, and they just bungled it up, I think.
Yeah.
They could have gone about it better.
But we only have a total of an hour to discuss this. So let's get back on track, everyone.
Yep. And so, yeah, we find Verdele. We find out Inuit's being held elsewhere and being brainwashed by a Watcher. And eventually what happens is, as a result of the brainwashing, Inuit gives up his musical talent to make a pact with a black dragon, which happens to be the same black dragon who killed our protagonist Kaim's parents way a long time ago, which explains his hatred to the Empire. But anyway, and along the way, one of the seals was broken, and soon another seal is going to be broken. But before we get there, we have to talk about the cannibal elf. She, too, is being held in an Empire prison. She sends a telepathic message to Verdele. So we attack that prison, and the cannibal gets out, and she joins our party after she tries to eat Kaim. She attacks Kaim, tries to eat him, fails, but nevertheless, Kaim agrees to take her into his service. And this woman is an elf. Her name is Ariok. And like I said, she's a cannibal. She likes to eat people. She particularly likes to eat children. So we get nervous whenever she gets near any children.
Yeah,
and
I can imagine.
And there's a scene in, I don't think it's a DLC, but it's like one of the chapters where she and our pedophile Leonard are in a village full of children, and she's eating them all, and Leonard is quite distressed by this. Along the way, and before that is when we meet Leonard, and he's mourning the destruction of his village, and you come to find out that he was off molesting children while his village was being sacked and burned. So,
oh my god!
And he made a pact. Initially, this fairy shows up and goads him into killing himself, but he refuses, and so she makes a pact with him instead. And the price he pays is that he gives up his eyesight, so he's blind. But he can still fight competently. He's just blind. So anyway, so we break the she-elf out of prison, the cannibal she-elf, and yet another seal is broken. And so I think now we've got 3 of the 4 seals broken. So Furia herself is the last remaining seal. And if she's killed, then the seals will be broken, and all heck is going to break loose. And so at this point, once Kaim learns the nature of the seals and what he's being asked to do, because Verdele begs him, please stop them from destroying the last seal. Please save Furia. So at this point, Inuit shows up with his black dragon, and Inuit and his dragon fight Kaim and his dragon. Kaim and Angelus lose handedly. Inuit plants a big kiss on Furia and takes her away with him to the Empire's flying fortress. And so naturally, we set off after them. Along the way, we meet this little kid called, what's his name? Siri. S-E-R-E, Sere. That's his name, Sere. He turns out to be the sibling of Mana, who is, again, the head of the Church of the Watchers, and hence the head of the Empire. Mana was unloved. Her mother sent her off in the wilderness to die, but the mother loved Siri. But eventually the parents were killed in an Imperial attack on their village, so I guess it doesn't matter. Siri has made a pact with a golem, a big stone creature, and the price he paid doesn't sound like much of a price, really. He lost his time, so he doesn't age. He's stuck as a child forever. So he's immortal, which is good, but he can't age. He's stuck as a child, which is bad. Kind of like the little girl vampire in Interview with the Vampire. She's stuck as a little girl forever, and she has all sorts of psychological issues because she's hundreds of years old, yet she's still a child. But anyway. So yeah, the 3 seals are broken, so now we're mounting a direct assault on to back up, the Union musters all its forces and mounts a last-ditch desperate attack on the Empire to try to save Furia and prevent the destruction of the world. And just when it looks like we've won, the Imperial Flying Fortress drops the equivalent of a series of... Well, it drops the dark fantasy equivalent of a series of nuclear bombs on the battlefield, which turns the whole place into a hellscape full of undead soldiers. So we have to kind of cut our way through that. We hop on our dragon. We make our way to the fortress. We have a big climactic fight with Inuit and his dragon, and depending on which ending you get, things go differently. So we'll kind of stick with ending the way things play out in ending E, because that's more efficient for our purposes. So like in ending E, by the time we get into the fortress, Fury Eye is dead. So the final seal has been broken. And so now the Watchers are descending. Well, the sky is kind of opening, and the Watchers are descending from the heavens. And the Watchers in this game are giant demon babies. I mean, giant humanoid babies.
Mm-hmm.
Much to Ariok's delight. She's like, big babies to eat, yay! But they wind up eating her, so it's a bit of a it's a bit of turnabout there, because a bunch of Watchers are converging on her, and she's like, "Oh, the ultimate feast!" And then she gets eaten.
Oh my god!
Yeah, so it's a bit of turnabout there. And then shortly after the Watchers appears this entity called the Queen Beast, and the confrontation with her will go differently depending on whether you choose Route D or E. If it's Route E, then Angela says something cryptic. If you want to catch a lion's cub, you got to do it on its own turf, which I'm not sure exactly what that means. But basically, I think it means you have to fight the Queen Beast on her own turf if you want to destroy her. Okay. So they engage the Queen Beast directly, who is basically a giant naked woman who looks like she's made of stone. Looks a great deal like the flower boss we fought in Drakengard 3. Coincidentally.
Oh.
Not coincidentally.
Richie, was this the flower lady you were telling me about at some point?
No, she doesn't make it to Automata.
No.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Okay.
Well, fortunately, I guess, because she's kind of the thing that causes the human race to go extinct, which we'll get to in a second. But
okay.
But yeah, so we engage the Queen Beast, and by this time she's swollen as if she's pregnant, so we don't know what's about to happen. But as soon as Kaim and Angelus engage the Queen Beast, there opens up this rift in space and time, and they fall into what is modern Tokyo. So first you see the Queen Beast land in the city, and then Angelus and Kaim come after her. And lo and behold, it's another rhythm game boss fight, just like in Drakengard 3. You're playing Guitar Hero, and you have to hit square and triangle at the appropriate times to counteract her musical intonations. And so because of this, I think the Queen Beast is the flower. Because the flower boss fight and the Queen Beast boss fight are basically identical, practically speaking. Except for some visual differences. So, I think the Queen Beast is the flower after ending D of Drakengard 3. And so it made it to the Drakengard dimension, and it made it back to the Drakengard dimension after it was sealed away in another dimension, because the seals were what were keeping it from coming back, and now that the seals are broken, it's back. But now it went through a dimensional rift into our world. And so once you defeat it, it sort of disintegrates into this fine particulate matter. And Angelus is sort of reveling in the wind. She's, flapping her wings and hovering there. She's like, oh, it's done at last. And then all of a sudden she's struck by 2 missiles. Boom! She's blown up, and her body falls from the sky, and she's impaled on the Tower of Tokyo. Because the Japanese Defense Force said, you know what, we better not let this dragon fly around. We're going to destroy it with missiles. And so that's what they did. So poor Angelus is dead, because the Japanese Air Force couldn't be bothered to sort of ascertain the nature of this creature before they decided to wipe it out. It turns out perhaps to be a mistake on their part, but it really inconsequential. And so the fine particulate matter into which the Queen Beast dissolved turns out to be the mesoparticle called the demon particle. And that is the source of the white chlorination syndrome that sets the stage for Nier, Gestalt / replicant. Which comes later. Now, initially ending E of Drakengard was supposed to be a joke, but that eventually became the foundation of the whole Nier franchise, which again... Yoko Taro's, clinically insane in the best possible way. Which what I'm trying to say by that is he's highly eccentric, and that informs his storytelling, and I think really makes it good. We should
also point out that Yoko Taro appears in public wearing a giant monster head.
Yes. If you're familiar with the character Emil, every time he appears in public, he's wearing Emil's head, essentially. I'm not sure whether Emil was based on that or whether that's based on Emil.
Yeah.
Wait, I thought that was his face.
I did too, but it turns out it's a mask. I mean, I was blown away when I
Oh my
learned.
God.
Yeah. So we got through Drakengard 3 and 1, and now we're finally ready to talk about Nier. So did that make sense? Because I feel like I went really fast.
Well, I think that's as much sense as it's ever going to make, all things considered.
Yeah, no, and I think people who are really familiar with this are going to be irked that I had to gloss over a lot of stuff and sort of leave out a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we have a time limit today, so we gotta be efficient.
Yeah.
I hear people mention these games a lot, and I never even imagined that they were this dark and messed up.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I always had a picture of like Skyrim when people talked about them.
Well, now Drakengard 2 is a lot brighter and more chipper, but Yoko Taro didn't have much to do with that one. So so there
Okay.
you go. So now we get to the events of Nier.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Heck
Nier.
yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, let me just, because I had to make notes on this because it's kind of insane.
Even the great Nick had to make notes for this, and he's a lawyer for a living.
Yeah. Of course, as a lawyer, I make notes. So the Queen Beast disintegrated. This is stuff you kind of don't really find out in Nier until much later in the game, but we may as well just talk about it now because we're trying to go in chronological order. But yeah.
Yeah, so now we're going to talk about the original Nier games, which are the hunky and also hunky protagonist games.
The young hunky and older hunky.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, the Nier Gestalt and Nier Replicant are basically identical in terms of narrative and gameplay, except that in Replicant, it's a younger Nier looking out for his sister, and in Gestalt, it's an older Nier looking out for his daughter. So brother Nier and father Nier, basically.
Okay.
Nier Replicant was never released in the West, but it was released in Japan, although people in the West have gotten hold of copies of it. But it was never formally released in the West. The only one released in the West was Gestalt. And I think Nier Automata follows Gestalt because you find references scattered about to a man who destroyed the world in an effort to save his daughter.
Yeah.
Although some people say that Brother Nier is the canon version because of other factors, but I think the fact that you find these notes about a man, fighting for his daughter, pretty much makes clear to me that it's Gestalt.
Yeah.
But people will argue
You
about that.
agree, Richie?
Yes. But also, like as I was saying, I think Nier Automata just it works better on its own if we just don't bother really thinking that hard about how it connects to Gestalt /Replicant.
You're probably right. People will naturally be interested to learn about Nier, but
yeah. I guess we'll get to it when we get to it. But there's some things I think work better on their own.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I played Automata before I knew a blessed thing about Nier, and it was a great experience.
Yeah.
So I'd highly recommend that. But of course, listening to this podcast will defeat that. But
I played all of the games related to Nier Automata before playing it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I platinumed all of them.
Yeah.
Brilliant strategist.
Yeah.
Or brilliant strategist. I don't know what's the proper word. I'm just kidding.
Richie was about to make a smartest comment because he knows I'm lying.
I think everyone knows you're lying.
See, I did too. I was just too polite to call you out. I try to be a good boy.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work, but
Okay, so original Nier.
Yep. And so
Let's go.
The Queen Bee, after you defeat her in Drakengard 1, ending E, which was supposed to be a joke, but wound up setting the stage for another franchise. She disintegrates into this fine particulate matter called meso, which is also known as the demon particle. And meanwhile, the Japanese military takes Angelus's body off to a secret location and experiments on her, and her body becomes the source of all the magic in the world. Well, basically, the red magic you use in the game is traceable to the experiments they did on Angelus's body. She's the reason magic is introduced into our world, which before that did not have magic. And so the meso particle, whenever anyone comes into contact with it, they're afflicted with this thing called white chlorination syndrome. And one of two things will happen to you. You'll either turn to a pillar of salt, kind of like in the book of Genesis, Lot's wife turns into a pillar of salt. It's kind of the same thing here. And that's one option. Another option is you'll turn into this, mad, aggressive creature. These creatures come to be known as the Legion, and you'll just turn aggressive and attack anybody you see, more or less. these creatures operate under the leadership of a person called Red Eye, which kind of ties back to Drakengard because the Imperial soldiers have red eyes and they're kind of mindless automatons killing people. So that's another tie-in to Drakengard. So, and the reason that people have different outcomes with the white chlorination syndrome is that when you're exposed to the mesoparticle, you're confronted with some kind of god or deity or spirit or something or other. I think it's whatever power created the Watchers to destroy humankind. That creature will confront you and give you a choice. You can either A, die and turn to salt, or B, give up your free will and become a member of the Legion and start killing people under the leadership of Red Eye. And so some people choose to become members of the Legion, some people choose to die. I think most people choose to die, which is why the widespread death and disintegration from the white chlorination syndrome. And the reason they call it chlorination syndrome is you're literally turning to salt, of which chloride is an element, So that's why they call it that. So you got the white chlorination syndrome. Initially, it starts out as a fairly localized phenomenon. I think in how do you say it, the Shinjuku province?
Yeah, Shinjuku.
Shinjuku. Yeah, it starts off there, and so they build this wall of Jericho around Shinjuku to try to contain it. But the Legion come together under Red Eye's leadership and break through the wall, and so it starts to spread all over Japan, to the point where Japan becomes desperate and forms a military alliance with the United States. And nuclear bombs are then dropped at locations throughout Japan to try to contain it. And so initial reports are that the Legion has been wiped out. But the disintegrated remains of the people who were infected with the white chlorination syndrome wafted up into the atmosphere and are carried throughout the world, particularly to very heavily populated China. As a result of which, the syndrome spreads worldwide. So the nukes were not a good idea because it spread the syndrome all over the world. And so just to kind of place it in time, the dragon and the queen beast land in Tokyo in I think 2003, June of 2003. When the game starts, we're in 2049. We find this dude in a hooded jacket, huddled up in an abandoned supermarket with either his daughter or his sister, depending on which game you're playing. And he's trying to protect her from these creatures called shades. And at this point, you don't know what the shades are, but once you understand Project Gestalt, you'll know what they are. It's like these shadowy creatures called shades. And he's got this talking book next to him that he seems to resent. But the shades are too much for him. And so he has to rely on the book to gain the magic. The book is a grimoire. It's a talking book that confers magical powers, basically. And so he has to rely on the book to gain the magical powers he needs to repel the shades. And we'll say daughter. We'll just follow Gestalt just for the sake of it. And save his daughter. And he tells his daughter, don't touch the book. Whatever you do, don't touch the book. Of course she touches the book while he's fighting. And that leads her to, contract some sort of deathly illness. And at the end of the intro, after you get to fight some shades and use all your cool magical powers, he's clutching her and he's saying, help us! Somebody help us! Stella! No, he doesn't say Stella, but... And then, fast forward 1,312 years into the future. Over a millennium in the future, we find Nier and the girl's name is Yona living together peacefully in an idyllic village. You're like, what?
Are they still? Is it the same people?
Well,
sort of, yeah.
And her name is Nier?
No, his name is Nier. Her name is Yona.
His name is Nier. Oh wait, so Nier Automata is named after him?
Yeah. Because it's in the Nier franchise. Yeah. So
mind blown. Okay, cool.
The player character in Nier Gestalt / Replicant is Nier. I mean, the reasons why they're still alive and together after 1,312 years are convoluted. It's not revealed till the end of the game. But we'll just say that all is not as it seems. Okay. At this point. Now we're told that humankind is on the brink of extinction, and we're just waiting out the clock, basically, at this point. But once the game really begins after the intro, it doesn't seem that way. It's like they're living together in this idyllic village. Yona has this strange disease by which these strange black runes appear on her skin, and they kind of float up and down on her skin. We later come to find out that's called the Black Scroll, but that ties into the whole reason why they're still around. And so the game saves that for the end, because it's like the big reveal at the end. And so he's doing odd jobs to try to take care of his daughter who has this disease. And the village is led by two characters named Devila and Popula, names that'll be familiar to anyone who's played through Nier Automata.
Yeah.
It's led by these two red-haired twins named Devila and Popula. Devila is usually off doing some eccentric thing, while Popula does the administrative work of running the village, and gives us lots of hints throughout the game. One day, Nier tells Yona about a very rare mystical flower called a lunar tear that can grant any wish. And so naturally, Yona, wishing to be free of her sickness and being a stupid kid, heads off to try to look for the lunar tear. We have no idea where she's gone. I think Popula suggests that we go look at this place called the Lost Shrine. And so we make our way through the Lost Shrine, which is kind of the game's first dungeon, and we find Yona on some altar guarded by two menacing, giant, gold, mechanical-looking suits of armor called Hansel and Gretel. We defeat them, but in the process, we see this book kind of sealed in this orb of red energy, and so naturally we hack and slash the red energy field to get the book out. Turns out it's a grimoire. He calls himself Weiss. He's a smart aleck talking book who accompanies us throughout the game and gives us magical powers. And functionally, in terms of gameplay, the grimoire works just like the pods that accompany you in Nier Automata. Basically, that's your ranged attacks, with some special attacks that you get as you find spells that... See, we're a little rough when we break Weiss out of his stasis inside the red energy field, and so as a result of that, he forgets most of the spells that he knew. And so we spend half the game running around looking for these secret spells, because we hope that one of them will contain the means to cure Yona of her disease. And so that's the quest that occupies us for the first half of the game.
Okay.
And there's a legend that when another grimoire called Noir throws the world into chaos, Grimoire Weiss will appear and set everything right with his secret verses that he's now forgotten. So, in an effort to seek a cure for Yona, and in an effort to keep Grimoire Noir from destroying the world, as it says in the legend, we have to run around, and our basic mission is to find these seals. And basically, after every boss fight, up to a point, we get one of the sealed spells, right?
Yeah.
So our quest takes us to a secluded village called Eri, where we're not quite welcome, but where we meet our scantily clad, foul-mouthed, violent-tempered sidekick called Kaine. And she's, in terms of personality, just think A2 from Nier Automata. And you'll have a pretty good idea of what Kaine's disposition is like, as well as her manner of dress. Because these...
She's effectively wearing some napkins and some dental floss.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
some artfully tied together napkins and dental floss that conceal just the right places and really no more.
It's really just down to one or two lines. They talk about her being intersex in material that's outside of the game. But then in the game, there's just one scene where someone says, "Oh, are you still pretending to be a girl?" And that's really all. You get flashbacks to her childhood.
Right. And she's an intersex who presents as a female.
Basically. Yeah. She's also possessed by a male, entity that we'll get into later on. But, she's intersex in kind of two different ways.
Right, because the male shade is basically possessing her, and if she lets down her guard, he'll take over. And there's a couple boss fights where you fight her when the shade has taken over.
Yeah.
Basically. I think his name is Tyran.
Yeah, Tyran.
And he's got a really interesting backstory that we probably don't have time for.
No.
At this point. But yeah. So one of the themes throughout is that Kaine is possessed by this shade called Tyran. And in the second playthrough where you kind of see things more from her point of view, you can hear how he taunts her and torments her every waking moment, pretty much. So you come across her, and then this big shade named Hook attacks the village, and it's the same shade that killed her grandmother some time ago. But anyway, we put his eye out, and we repel him, and he runs away to live to fight another day.
Mm-hmm.
And then... Yeah, so anyway, we pick it up from there, and Kaine can use magic because she's possessed by the shade. Seems like after most boss fights, though, Kaine winds up critically wounded. This happens frequently.
Yeah.
So
in cutscenes, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a reason for her to kind of leave the company, I guess, because she's always getting critically wounded. So after the fight with Hook, we leave Kaine to recover. We return to the village. We do some quests to strengthen our weapons because more and more shades are starting to appear around the village. And in the process, we meet a colorful pair called Jacob and Gideon, who are brothers. They send us to find scrap because their mother is missing. We fight our way into the scrap heap to fight an automated defense system, and then we find that their mother is dead. She basically forsook them to go be with her lover. And so it's kind of a crushing realization when you find that out. So we come back to the boys. We tell them their mother abandoned them and died. And they say, okay, well, shoot, that kind of sucks. But, if you need any work on your weapons, come back. Because Jacob and Gideon's shop is always open. And Jacob is kind of the mature brother in charge of things. And Gideon is kind of the idiot dependent. At least when you first meet them. Later on, Gideon's kind of goes nuts. But I guess we can get to that. So upon returning to the village, we find Kaine and learn that the village is being attacked by shades, including Hook, whom we just defeated earlier. So we run all over the village with Kaine, who's now feeling good, fighting Hook. Near the end, Hook releases a hallucinogen that causes Kaine to kind of hear her grandmother's voice. He's kind of taunting her and manipulating her because he's the one who killed her grandmother. Here's where you come to find out that the grandmother made Kaine an entire wreath of lunar tears, even though most people will go their entire lives without seeing one. They're so rare. Somehow the grandmother managed to find a bunch of these and put them together in kind of a nice little wreath. So that's how we find our lunar tear. But Hook tortured and killed the grandmother and taunted Kaine for her weakness and inability to stop it. So Hook's kind of a sadistic shade.
Yeah.
But eventually our heroes win, and Kaine mentions a king who was rumored to have come down with the Black Scroll. And so she speculates that they may have found a cure for it. Naturally, Nier wants to find a cure for the Black Scroll that has afflicted Yona. So we set off to the desert village of Facade. That's the name, Facade.
Facade?
Yeah, the name of the village is...
Sounds sketchy.
It does.
What do you think they wear in Facade?
Masks?
They wear masks, exactly.
Oh, brilliant, huh?
Yeah, I think that's rule 86,502, that they have to wear masks. This place is a lawyer's paradise.
Why?
The whole culture is based on this series of rules everyone has to obey.
Right. I think there were, over 120,000 rules?
Yeah.
It was insane. It's like, and sometimes it's amusing because sometimes the rules will overlap and contradict each other, and it leads to some amusing predicaments. Like, this rule says this, but this rule says this. Oh, what are we going to do? Well, this third rule kind of supersedes the other rules, and so we can do this. Oh, okay, cool. And Kaine is welcome in this village because she saved the prince's life a long time ago. I think it was the prince or somebody in the village. She saved their life because wolves are kind of roaming the area outside of Facade. And so Kaine killed some wolves and saved some villagers. And so under rule, 85 bajillion and 2, they owe her a debt. And so she's always welcome in the village, right? And so she walks right on in. As it turns out, the king has passed away from the Black Scroll, unfortunately. But the young prince is still alive. But the young prince is missing.
Uh-oh.
And so as you're wandering around the village, sort of kind of taking it in, you meet a disfigured girl named Fira. Of course, it doesn't matter that she's disfigured because everybody wears masks. And the reason she's in Facade is because her parents cast her out because of her disfigurement.
Okay.
So anyway, she comes up again later. So the prince is missing, so we go to a place called the Barren Temple to find him. And after a boss fight with a bunch of cubes, which is kind of reminiscent of many of the encounters in Nier Automata, or kind of foreshadows a lot of the encounters in Nier Automata, because you literally fight a bunch of cubes. And after that fight, we find the prince and bring him back to assume his place as king, and of course collect another hidden verse, because that's what you do after a boss fight. You collect a hidden verse. And so after this, Nier has a dream hinting that a sealed verse is hidden away in a place called the Forest of Myth, to which we'll return in Nier Automata, but that's another matter. So naturally, Nier goes there. And this is widely regarded as one of the more annoying parts of the game, because you have to because everybody in the village is afflicted with this thing called, the death dream, I think it is.
Yeah.
And they can only communicate and experience life in terms of text. So it's a text wild goose. You're trying to nail down the solution to all these riddles, and it's all text puzzles.
This dream thing, it's a contagious dream. And it starts affecting the game itself. So characters will start talking as though they're in a play. And there will be on-screen stage directions and things that explain everything that's happening.
Yep. And Nier Automata does something like this with some of the scenes, just to kind of call back. But there's no... In Nier, there's actually a reason for it, this death dream. And Nier Automata just chooses to do it as a matter of artistic direction. But whatever. I enjoyed it. And I think the source of it is this tree called the Sleeping Beauty, which we learn is a sophisticated sentient archival system designed to record the collective memories of humankind, at least going back 2,000 years, which may have been when the tree was created, I'm not sure. But yeah, the tree is like a sentient memory bank storing the collective memories of mankind. which is fairly important to ending E, which may or may not actually appear in the game. But that's another convoluted aspect of the storytelling. So after we solve the riddle and wake the village, Nier returns home. And I can't remember if we actually get a verse or a spell after that one. I think we do, but I can't remember. And, after this, we receive a letter from Yona's boyfriend. Yona has a boyfriend, supposedly.
Oh, snap.
We receive a letter purporting to be from Yona's boyfriend. Says that the boyfriend is sick. And Yona gets the letter, and she's like, "Oh, Daddy, my boyfriend is sick. Please go help him." Mm-hmm. And so he's like, "What? You've got a boyfriend? Oh, angry dad. Ooh. I'm going to go give this young whippersnapper a piece of my mind. You get away from my daughter." Well, it's not exactly like that. But...
That's when Sin redubs him.
or talks to him in her own language that only she and Derek understand.
Yeah. Like that would have been a good riff on the death stream if it just forced everyone to talk like Sin.
Yeah.
Well, you're saying my own language that no one can understand, but yesterday we had Cal on and he spoke it.
Yes, it's true.
I think a lot more people understand it now that you might think.
Well, it's catching on.
Yeah.
Well, you're like J.R. Tolkien. You're actually inventing languages. Because I think Tolkien actually invented Elven languages. Like he didn't just make up random phrases. He actually created languages.
Yeah, he was a linguist. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a little known fact that the language he invented is actually based on my imaginary language.
Oh, okay.
Which seems incredible, seeing that you were born well after his death.
Well, she predicted it after it happened.
That's right.
She's good at this.
She is good at predicting things, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Predicting content and retroactively predicting linguistic developments in high fantasy novels.
Yes.
There we go. Yeah.
Wow, that hurts my brain. Oh dear, this is why I love coming on with you guys. It's a wild world of wonderful things. So we head off just because we're short on time, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to wrap up in like 15 minutes because Richie has got to sleep because it's like 5 a.m. in Australia or something.
It's 4 a.m.
Oh my god, yes you do! You told me that you're like, oh, I'm not sure, I have to go. Like, how long is this?
Yeah, but it's fine.
Oh my god, now it's fine? Oh my god.
You don't have to do anything.
Well, you have to sleep, it's like 5 a.m.
It's 4 a.m.
Okay, the reason I'm a little irate right now is because before the podcast you were like, I'm not sure, it's a little late. But now you're like, no, it's fine. Oh, now, I see how it is. When it's like, oh, it's a podcast with Sin, well, I'm not sure, it's kind of late. As soon as Richie knows, oh, Nick is going to be there, it's going to be cool. Yeah, I don't need to sleep.
Hey, everybody wants to be around lawyers, I don't know. Because we're the cool kids, man. We're not the cool kids.
Yeah, Nick, I'm stuck in a contract with a strange podcast. I need to talk to you about getting out of it later on.
So are you Lawrence or Garriman? I guess you're Garriman because you're stuck. Oh man, that's wild. Well, I don't want to keep you up too late.
No,
I guess.
It's fine.
So.
I don't care.
Yeah, he doesn't care, Nick, because it's you. If it was me, he'd care.
I hope I'm not like being inconsiderate and just like hogging all the exposition.
No, don't worry, because like you clearly like I am not as familiar with it as you because you've got notes.
Yeah, I made like 12 pages of notes because I'm a lawyer, and that's what we do.
See, because Sin said we're discussing Nier, by which I thought she just meant Nier Automata.
Okay,
and I didn't know we were doing the whole Drakengard Gestalt thing.
Yeah, but I told you multiple episodes. You should have extrapolated from that.
But this is one episode.
No, but I told you we're doing multiple episodes on Nier, so you should have, understood that means we're starting from the beginning till the end.
All right, okay.
So the first episode would be the beginning, and the beginning is these games.
Yeah, but it could also have been the beginning of Automata.
Because it's hard to define the beginning, I guess. Like Richie
Nick,
said,
are you taking Rich's side?
I wouldn't dare.
Good.
I wouldn't dare.
All right, go on, Nick.
Although I'm kind of glad I got to hear the clapping, though. That was cool. Because it's noon, so you don't have to worry about waking the neighbors.
Yeah, it's true. There we go.
Like in the sleep podcast, it's like you have to kind of clench your armchair so that you don't do the clapping and the pounding of the desk.
Yeah, my hands are in fists the entire time, and I punch the air.
I heard you listening to me, Richard. We love our long-suffering straight man, though. We really do. All right, cool. So I guess I'll get back to it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, yeah, so we've been through the Forest of Myth. Now we're on our way to meet Yona's supposed boyfriend, who is supposed to be sick. So once we get there, though, it's really weird, because as soon as we kind of set foot on the grounds, everything most things kind of turn to black and white. Which should tip you off that some strange things are afoot. And
right.
As it turns out, many, many very strange things are afoot. And you see all these, what you initially assume are statues in the courtyard, but they look like people in random positions. Sort of like how the petrified people in Yahar Ghul are kind of in random positions, only there aren't as many. Because in Yahar Ghul it's thousands of people, but here it's like a few people scattered here and there that are kind of petrified in these random positions. You assume they're statues, but you later come to find out they're actually petrified people. But yeah, you enter the mansion, and you find a young man named, and this is going to ring a bell for a lot of Nier Automata players, you find a young man named Emil. My favorite character in the whole franchise. I love Emil. He's a wonderfully complex blend of sadness, sensitivity, and unbridled destruction. But we'll get to the unbridled destruction part later. Right now, he looks like a typical young boy, but he's essentially blindfolded. Or it's either a blindfold or these opaque glasses that he wears, but he can't see, and it's by choice. He walks around with his eyes covered up. And that's because anyone who makes eye contact with him is immediately petrified.
Oh, snap!
Hence all the seeming statues in random positions you see scattered about the courtyard.
So he's like Medusa.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah. You look into he's got these red eyes, and you look into his eyes, and bam. Of course, red eyes are kind of a recurrent visual motif throughout the series. So he has these red eyes, and whenever you look into his eyes, you're petrified.
Can he turn people into snacks?
Nope, just stone, unfortunately.
Aww.
Now later on, he acquires these crazy magical powers, so maybe he can.
Okay.
But at this point, all he can do is turn people to stone. And that's why he walks around blindfolded, because he doesn't want to accidentally turn anybody to stone.
Have you played Kirby, Sin?
Yeah.
There's a power in that turns everything on screen into a snack.
Oh, that's right.
I did not know that.
The cookie, the chef, yeah.
Yeah.
I played a little bit of Kirby, not too much.
He gets a giant pot, and he, bangs the ladles together, and then all the enemies jump in the pot, and they come out as snacks.
That is amazing! Do you eat them?
Yeah.
Kirby eats everything.
It kills everything on screen by turning it into delicious food.
Yeah.
That is my type of game. Oh my god.
Yeah,
I haven't gotten that far in Kirby, so...
Yeah, Kirby's godlike once you get to some of the more advanced powers and stuff. But yeah, no, you should play Kirby because he's constantly eating and everything is a snack. And
yeah, and he doesn't even gain weight. That's amazing.
No, he's a little plump, but that's as plump as he gets.
Yeah.
When he puffs up, it's just air, so he can just blow it out again.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, he doesn't gain any weight. He's like the Tasmanian devil. He's like a bottomless pit. It's like on Tiny Toons, the counterpart to the Tasmanian devil is called Dizzy the Devil. And one episode, he eats an entire battleship. It's like they're feeding him one ridiculous thing after another, and one time they feed him a battleship, and he just swallows it.
Oh my god.
That's Kirby. He can eat a battleship and not gain weight. But anyway. Oh, I love Kirby. Haven't played Kirby in ages. But thanks for bringing Kirby up, Richard.
That's
warm, that gives me warm fuzzies in my heart. But Emil, there's a library inside the mansion, right?
You guys, wait a minute.
Yep.
Emil is like a round head, and Kirby is a round ball.
Oh.
Confirmed.
Okay, good.
Deepest lore. Yep, Kirby is Emil.
I'm just going to look up to see if there's fan art of what would happen if Kirby ate Emil.
Well, that's sort of right up your area of academic expertise, isn't it? Those kinds
maybe.
of... Yeah. Sort of.
Well, I found Kirby with the Wii Fit Trainer's legs, which is kind of disturbing. But the rest of him is just Kirby.
Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. Well, actually, Richard, didn't you spend a year of your life looking at pictures of Bowsette?
No, that was shortly afterward.
Okay, yeah.
I managed to avoid Bowsette. Now, whenever anyone asks me, what was it like, I'm just like, well, you know how you got sick of Bowsette after, a month?
Yeah.
I didn't have that luxury.
Because that was part of your academic research, I guess, for your dissertation.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Imagine if you studied something useful, Richie. Ooh. That was the longest ooh ever.
That woo, that was a formidable woo.
Yeah, thank you.
I was like, how long can this go on? This is impressive. My wife hands me a note, going out for a bit, be back soon, heart.
Oh, that's so sweet.
She does cute little things like that all the time. I love it.
Aw.
Anyway, we're like the most nauseating couple, but that's okay. No, Schmoopy. No, you're Schmoopy. No, you're Schmoopy. Seinfeld.
Aw.
Anyway. But when you first meet Emil, he doesn't have the big round head. That doesn't. He looks like just a normal, young, I think 7-year-old or so boy, 7 to 10-year-old boy.
I think he's meant to be 10, yeah.
Yeah, 10.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
it.
Okay.
So he looks normal, except he's dressed rather well and he walks around with a blindfold because he doesn't want to petrify anybody. He feels rather bad about that. As we know about Emil, he feels rather bad about killing things, even if it seems arguably justified.
Aw.
Even though we'll get to that. He's kind of a super weapon, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
He thinks that in the library inside the mansion, there'll be some sort of tome that has a way to cure his eyes so that he no longer petrifies people. So naturally, your job is to escort Emil through the library. Now, there's a butler in the mansion, and why the freaking butler couldn't escort him to the library?
Hey, he's not paid to do that job, okay?
Yeah, it's like, well, the butler's like, well, I'm not the protagonist of this game. I shouldn't be running these fetch missions.
There we go.
I'm just an NPC. As it turns out, it wasn't Emil that sent the letter to Yona. It was the butler who wanted to get near to the mansion. I think there's actually some danger involved maybe in going to the library. And Neil is much better equipped to handle dangerous situations than the butler is.
Yeah.
So that's really why Nier has to do it. I just figured I'd poke fun at video game logic because I love to do that. How a superhuman hunter can't climb over a fence or swim. I mean, for heaven's sake. Anyway, sorry. Because the freaking developers don't want to program water physics. Anyway, back to the game.
Back to the game.
Let's see. In the library, we have a boss fight with Grimoire. I'm a little fuzzy on the name. Rupert or Rupert. Something like that. The name begins with an R. We have a boss fight with a Grimoire who uses magic against us.
Hang on.
I forget the name. It's like Rupert or Rupert or something like that. Like, I hastily wrote down the name, and I don't think I wrote it down correctly. So that's why I'm a little fuzzy on the exact pronunciation.
I thought it was Grimoire Rubric, but that's something else.
Rubric. That's it. Yeah, I think I misheard. Yeah, that's it. For some reason, my brain bungled that into Rupert. But yeah, Rubric, I think you're right. So we have a boss fight with this Grimoire, nameless, the nameless Grimoire. The long-lost son of Grimoire Gwyn. Now, the book does contain a cure. Not for Emil, but for those he's petrified. So, with the knowledge we gain from this Grimoire, we're able to cure the people who are petrified in the courtyard.
It's Grimoire Rubrum, apparently.
Rubrum. Oh. Okay, so
Okay.
We eventually found our way to the correct pronunciation. Because we're a professional podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's the boss we fight. And then once that is done, Kane and Emil kind of hit it off right away because they both know what it's like to be kind of ostracized and outcast and everything like that. Kind of because she's intersex and because she has that shade. She's always felt ostracized and alone. And Emil the same way because of his petrification.
Yeah, she calls them a merry band of freaks.
Exactly.
That's how they're described, yeah.
This place is a cesspool of doddering old folk and degenerates. But anyway. That's kind of a thing. Miyazaki seems to draw some inspiration from some of these games. Because like in Drakengard, the sword that the protagonist uses reminds me a lot of the dark sword that the Dark Wraith use in Dark Souls.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say that because I googled the Hunky Nier protagonist and I saw like the sword, and it's literally the Dark Souls sword.
So I think to me that's evidence that Miyazaki took at least some inspiration from this franchise.
Yeah.
Only Yoko Taro does not share Miyazaki's misgivings about portraying violence against children. Because there's one scene in Drakengard where you see the golem, crush Mana. Just he just crushed her. And of course, there's the cannibal she-elf who eats children, and there are the demon babies whom you fight in one final boss battle in Ending D, I think.
So they're basically the same. It's just Miyazaki's not allowed to portray it on screen.
Yeah. So if it were Yoko Taro directing Bloodborne, we would have seen Murgo at the end, the boss fight with the wet nurse, and
yeah,
we probably
would have seen so many babies being crushed.
Yeah, and we would have seen Ocelot in the boss fight with Osiros.
Yeah,
and and Ocelot would probably have been eaten or crushed at some point.
Oh yeah.
But anyway. So after all this is done and the people are unpetrified and Emil he's kind of disappointed that he's not, his eyes aren't cured, but he's made a new friend in Kaine because they're both different, so they identify with each other. And they're fast friends throughout the game from this point. So Nier returns to the village and Emil follows soon after. He's looking a little out of sorts, but he's claiming that shades are coming to attack the village. Shortly after, guess what happens? Shades
are coming to attack the village.
Shades arrive and attack the village.
Oh, snap.
Led by this humongous shade called Jack of Hearts, who's kind of a smart-mouthed, violent, sadistic type of shade. Because the shades, at least some of the shades can talk to you. Some of them are slavering lunatics, but some of them can actually talk to you in an understandable way. Now, most of the time, your first playthrough, the shades are talking in this language that you can't understand, but second playthrough, you kind of hear things from Kaine's perspective. She can understand the language that the shades are speaking because she has one inside her. So anyway, our goal is to keep the Jack of Hearts from getting to the library in the village because it's believed that the library in the village might contain information relevant to curing the black scrawl that's afflicting Yona. So we're desperate to keep Jack of Hearts from getting to the library. So our heroes fight Jack, and then they fall back to the library. Jack actually gets in the library, but Kaine manages to seal him inside the basement. And after this, Nier is stabbed in the back by by this being called Shadow Lord. Ooh, mysterious Shadow Lord. Who could this possibly be? It's Nier, but we'll get to that.
They don't do a very good job of hiding it.
No, they don't.
It looks exactly like him.
It does. Like, Shadow Lord bears a striking resemblance to Nier. Methinks there may be a connection, forsooth. And Shadow Lord is accompanied by his own grimoire called Grimoire Noir, the one we heard about in the legend, who's supposed to destroy the world.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And Grimoire Noir is also the grimoire at the very beginning of the game that our hero doesn't want to interact with, but then has to in order to save Yona from the shades. So, yeah, so we've come full circle now, as these games tend to do. And in the process of this confrontation, Grimoire Noir has a telepathic conversation with Grimoire Weiss. Because by this point, you found all the sealed verses.
Yeah.
One boss fight after another, you found all the sealed verses. So Grimoire Noir says that now that they found all the sealed verses, they can join together and let loose all the shades upon all the worlds. It's kind of a cryptic reference, and you're not sure quite what it means. The way he makes it sound is that the shades are basically going to come to dominate the world and wipe out humankind. That's the way they kind of make it sound. It's not what he's talking about, as you come to find out later, but that's the way they kind of make it sound at this point. It's like, oh, we better not let the seals break, or else the Watchers are going to come and destroy the world. It's a similar thing here. At least it's implied at this point in the game. So they can join together and let the shades loose to take over the world, or so it seems, to make a new and perfect world, renovate the world, and in the process destroy everything we know and love. And he says that the whole quest to find the sealed verses was masterminded by the Shadow Lord, who's been manipulating things in the shadows the whole time. The shadows. Eventually, Kaine goes on a really vulgar and foul-mouthed tirade and eventually calls Grimoire Weiss out of the trance. Because that's her thing. She's A2, basically. Very foul-mouthed and hot-tempered, but ultimately lovable and, relatable. Great character on the whole. That's just kind of her shtick, just like A2. You come to love A2, and you kind of chuckle at her because she's hot-tempered and foul-mouthed. So again, think A2. Only maybe slightly more hot-tempered than A2. I find Kaine to be a bit more of a hothead even than A2 was. Because A2 softens up pretty quick, but Kaine kind of stays hot-tempered for a little longer, I think. But anyway. And so Shadow Lord eventually wins the confrontation, and he takes Yona with him and leaves to some unknown location. And so Nier's like, "No, you took my daughter, you fiend. Bring her back, anon!" But he doesn't. So that's not what he says. I just figured I'd work in some quaint, antiquated verbiage. So skip 5 years later. Yona's still missing. But Nier is wearing a different outfit. By now, he's a hardened combat veteran, very angry, and he's been searching for Yona this whole time.
And he's got an eye patch.
He's got an eye patch.
Got an eye patch. That's the way you show time has passed.
Yep. He doesn't look like he's really aged at all.
No.
But he's got this eye patch.
Good enough.
Now, Nier himself has not aged at all, but then he comments to Popula how she doesn't appear to have aged at all in the last 5 years.
Is it because they've been on that juicing diet?
Yes.
It must be. Yeah, they're juicing and they're on the keto diet, I think. So naturally, they're not. Of course, that's a bit of foreshadowing, mentioning that she hasn't aged. But anyway, so Emil sends a letter indicating that, well, to kind of back up, there are more and more shades appearing, and so the village, things have kind of gone to pot. There's not enough food. People are afraid to go out because of how many shades there are running around. And so things have gotten a bit darker in the last 5 years.
Okay.
And amidst all this darkness and carnage, Emil sends a letter indicating that there might be a cure for Kaine. Because, I skipped over something kind of important. While we're fighting Jack of Hearts in the library, we mentioned that Kaine seals him in the basement, but that's behind a wooden door that Jack of Hearts is going to break through because he's this big, powerful shade. And so to keep him in the basement, what happens is Kaine backs up against the door and asks Emil to petrify her so that she and the door itself will turn to stone and keep Jack of Hearts sealed inside the basement in the library. So Emil is initially reluctant, but then he takes off his blindfold and looks Kaine directly in the eyes. She's backed up against the door, so she turns to stone, and the door itself turns to stone for reasons I don't quite understand. Because I guess it makes sense for the game. The game needed it to. And so that stone barrier keeps Jack of Hearts sealed inside the basement, but as a consequence, Kaine is lost to us. She's turned to stone. So again, she has a penchant for getting wounded or otherwise incapacitated. And so she carries through on that penchant here. Emil sends a letter, though, indicating that there might be a cure for Kaine. Please come see me. So naturally, that's what we do. After we comment to Popula that she doesn't seem to have aged, and she just waves it off as kind of an awkward compliment. So once we arrive at the mansion, Emil says that, talk about recycling devices here. Emil says there's yet another room in the mansion that might have the information we need to harness all magic.
We should also point out that, going over, gimmicks the game does. The mansion is all static backgrounds like Resident Evil. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It employs a lot of, the same camera angle.
Yeah, it's like the mansion is just like a big meta reference to Resident Evil. Yeah.
It is. No, you're absolutely right about that. I kind of glossed over that, but you go into certain rooms and the camera angle changes in peculiar ways that really reminds you of Resident Evil.
Yeah.
And kind of the whole creepy motif. Yeah, absolutely. The whole thing's a big callback to Resident Evil. As Resident Evil fans will realize once they play the area. So I think it's really good, art direction. It kind of gives you a bit of a different experience. It kind of breaks the monotony a little bit. So I think it's really a good aspect on the whole. Plus, if you're a Resident Evil fan, you'll get all giddy because, yay, callback to a game I like. Gamers eat that stuff up. And I say this being one and perfectly susceptible to that phenomenon. So lo and behold, there's yet another room in the library that might have information we need. And lo and behold, Nier has to, escort Emil there once again. And this is the point where we find out some really bizarre stuff about the mansion itself. We found out that in the courtyard, there's a secret entrance to an as yet unexplored part of the mansion. Because the mansion itself is a front for a secret research facility that was using the demonic element to experiment on children to develop super weapons to combat the Legion. The two primary test subjects were codenamed Number 6 and Number 7. They were siblings, brother and sister. Number 6 was the sister. Her name was Halua. Number 7 was a young boy. His name was Emil. So Emil was one of the children who were experimented on. These two were regarded as the success. Halua, in particular, was regarded as the success. She became this inhuman super weapon. She had the round head, right? The trademark Emil round head. And this sort of almost skeletal-looking body. Well, her body kind of reminds me of the Bloodstarved Beast a little bit. Part of her is kind of flayed open,
She looks like a skeleton, yeah.
Yeah, basically, yeah. She's emaciated, and part of her is kind of flayed open. So Halua became the successful super weapon, Bloodstarved Beast-looking thing. Sort of. But as a consequence, she went berserk, so they had to contain her inside the facility. And Emil then was given the ability to petrify as a way to kind of keep her in check and keep anyone else from getting to her. So anyone goes inside the mansion, they're going to get petrified. you know.
Mhm.
So that was a kind of a security device to kind of keep her sealed away and safe. So naturally, we fight Halua. And once the boss fight is over, Emil kind of fuses with her, and that's when he acquires the trademark round head. And the rest of his body is essentially a skeleton.
Yeah, she like swallows him up, basically.
Yeah, and then that's at that point they fuse together.
The boss fight is you basically trying to kill Halua to get Emil out.
Out of her, yeah.
But
that's right.
Yeah, he ends up as an Emil Halua kind of hybrid thing. Like they fuse together into the one thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so
he refers to it after that as my sister's body. So I think the implication is he's actually inside the like Halua skeleton. It's just smaller.
So yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. She eats him, and then we're fighting her to try to get him out. And then in the process, they kind of fuse together in this weird way, or he assumes her body somehow.
Yeah.
Or or he he's now controlling her, and the body is just shrunk down. And whatever happens, Emil takes on this grotesque new form, but Nier accepts him, and in Nier Gestalt, there's this wonderful sort of fatherly display of affection as Nier makes it clear that doesn't matter, you're still you, we still accept you, we still love you. And Kaine eventually accepts him too, despite because again she knows what it's like to be different. So Emil becomes part of the gang, despite his grotesque appearance. So on the one hand, he's really weird looking, but on the other hand, he now has a host of new magical powers, which will adapt to suit the narrative needs of the game. Pretty much.
Yeah, basically.
Like, Emir has all these new abilities that we don't yet understand, and so whenever the game needs him to have a new and awesome power, he'll have one.
He's the opposite of Kaine.
Pretty much.
Yeah, Kaine has all these cool powers, but in cutscenes, she's just randomly knocked out.
Yeah, whereas Emil does the knocking out.
Yeah.
Because of his new abilities. So yeah, now that Emil has all these new powers, the first thing he does is to unpetrify Kaine. And of course, naturally, that means Jack of Hearts pops out of the basement. He's like all flamboyant about it. Jack is back, baby. Kind of like in.
So wait, he's been in the basement this entire time?
He has.
He didn't look for another way out, or?
Apparently, there wasn't one. Apparently, that's one fortified basement.
How is he still alive?
He's a shade.
He's a shade. Yeah, they don't necessarily require.
He's basically a ghost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was he really bored? I'd be really bored.
He probably was. I would say he was. Of course, it was a library, so I guess there was a lot to read.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. Okay.
And he wasn't like a lunatic shade. He still had his wits about him, so he could read, presumably. Some of the shades are just insane, but some of them are quite calm and sentient.
I always like it in fantasy and science fiction when someone's like locked somewhere for years or possibly centuries, and then you can just pick up the conversation you were having with them.
Yeah,
it's like they got locked away.
It's like nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
Or like, you leap forward in time and they've been stuck in the same place for centuries.
I remember there's specifically an episode of Torchwood where someone was buried underground for 2,000 years and then dug up and they just continued talking.
It's like it never happened.
Yeah.
Like ServPro, like nothing ever happened. ServPro is a cleaning service in the United States, and that's kind of their logo. Like nothing ever happened.
That sounds very ominous.
Yeah, like nothing ever happened.
Well, there's a hardware store near me where the slogan is "lowest prices are just the beginning," and I'm like, of what? Feels like they should be saying "lowest prices are just the beginning," Mr. Bond.
No, Mr. Bond, I want you to die. Oh, but I love James Bond. Yeah, but anyway. There's another thing I could talk about for ages, but obviously we don't have time for that. So yeah, we free Kaine and she's back and just as hot-tempered and foul-mouthed and lovable as she ever was.
Aww.
At this point, the ever-helpful Popula tells Nier that the villagers are afraid of Emil and Kaine, who therefore are not welcome. On hearing this, naturally, Nier gets upset to the point where he wants to strangle Popula, but he refrains himself. So instead just flies off the handle and storms off. But later he comes back and apologizes for his outburst. And Popula just lets it slide. So then, as kind of a consolation prize, Popula tells Nier, so at this point, both Emil and Kaine are kind of sleeping outside, like a couple of outcasts. You know, so it kind of reinforces the whole outcast.
Yeah. This is where she calls them a merry band of freaks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they're sleeping outside, and I think at this point, Emil and Kaine really start to bond.
Yeah,
because they're the two freak outcasts, and they really only have each other and Nier to rely on. Of course, Nier's missing an eye somehow, so I guess he's a little bit of a freak in that respect too. Which, of course, that's kind of a recurring thing too, because in Drakengard 3, Zero's effectively missing an eye because the flower is popping out of her right eye. So,
oh my god.
That's kind of a callback to Drakengard 3, at least arguably.
That is so freaky.
Yeah. And actually, the runes that appear on your skin and the black scroll are kind of the celestial alphabet that you see in some of the Drakengard games as well. So that's another callback. And the consensus is that that's basically referring to the proteins in DNA. It's like the 4 letters that recur, like A, D, and whatever the other
AGCT.
AGCT, yes, which is kind of...
Dr. Peelbeam would know.
Yeah, I only know that because of Jurassic Park.
Yep. Great movie. But anyway, yeah, no, absolutely, because that's all about DNA and cloning and all that good stuff. Good science fiction tropes. So yeah, Papala tells Nier that he can find a lead to the Shadow Lord's location at where else but the Lost Shrine, to which we often resort in this game.
Yeah.
So naturally, the gang goes there. Once we're there, the big robot, or the big suit of armor, whatever he is, Gretel shows up, because we fought him before at the beginning of the game. And this time he's speaking in strange tongues that we can't understand in the first playthrough, but that we can understand on the second, and it makes us feel really bad for fighting him when we can't understand it. Because it turns out he's just trying to protect a bunch of Shade children. He's like, they can't defend themselves, leave them alone, they're my friends, please stop! But of course we just mercilessly kill him and all the other Shades anyway. On the second playthrough, we feel like total jerks for everything we're doing.
I can understand.
Because almost every boss has a sympathetic story, and from a certain point of view, we could be seen as very much the bad guys in what we're doing. But we'll briefly go over that. Once we're there, Gretel shows up, speaking in strange tongues. We defeat him, but of course, he critically wounds Kaine during the fight, because that's just what happens. And at this point, the Shade inside of her, Tyran, takes control, and we have a rousing boss fight. After which we finally defeat her and suppress the Shade. And she's like, oh, I can't hang out with you guys because I'm going to turn into the Shade and I'm going to kill you and it's going to be really awkward.
Aww.
And Emil's like, no, dang it. You're my only friend. We're going to keep doing it as many times as it takes because you're my buddy and you're the only one who understands me. And wah, because Emil cries a lot. So
that was a masterful impression, Nick.
He's like, you helped me go on despite the fact that I'm an ugly super weapon. So you can't leave us, Kaine. So he convinces her to stay with the group.
Okay.
And at some point you find a mysterious stone fragment, a not at all common RPG trope. And so naturally we take it back to the all-knowing, all-helpful Papala, who happens to know that it's one of 5 fragments of what is supposed to be the key to the Shadow Lord's castle.
Is it one of the 5 fragments of Manus?
Of course. I mean, it's the Shadow Lord. Manus is the father of the Abyss, which is dark. So, confirmed.
I can't think of any other games where the villain is dark, so it's definitely a reference.
Absolutely. No question. Never mind when the games came out. Let's see. So of course we have to find the remaining 4. The one we found is called Stone Guardian. Each one has a name. Stone Guardian, Loyal Cerberus, Memory Tree, Sacrifice, and Law of Robotics in no particular order. At this point, you can choose to go to the Junk Heap or to the Forest of Myth. If you go to the Junk Heap, you see a flashback in which Jacob and Gideon are salvaging parts. A large metal plate falls on Jacob, crushing him. Gideon accidentally rips off Jacob's arm, trying to pull him out from underneath said metal slab. And this drives him crazy. While this is going on, Gideon encounters a strange robotic life form foreshadowed to Nier Automata. And so he comes to blame all of his problems and everyone else's problems on machines, and he vows that he will go crazy and destroy every machine in existence, even though his stock in trade is repairing and building and working with machines. So it seems a little inconsistent, which lends credence to the notion that he's a little crazy. And when we see him in the present day, he's actually missing his left arm, and it's replaced with a robotic arm. because I guess he felt guilty that he ripped off Jacob's arm trying to get him out from underneath the slab, even though it didn't matter because Jacob was dead. So out of guilt, he kind of cut off his own arm, but then he realized, hey, life is harder without an arm, so he gave himself a robotic arm.
That's deep. Life is harder without an arm.
Life's harder with only one arm.
Yeah.
But he felt basically it was guilt, so he cut off his arm, but then got tired of only having one arm and gave himself a robotic arm, even though he hates all machines. Well, he hates all machine. I almost said machine life forms, but he hates all living machines, basically.
Yeah.
So big foreshadow to Nier Automata there. But anyway, so Gideon sends us to destroy some robots to fetch some memory alloy, another term familiar to Nier Automata fans.
Yep.
To upgrade our sword. We do so, but of course Gideon will need some time to perform the upgrade because the narrative needs us to not get the sword right away. It needs us to go do something else first. So once we return to the village, Papala hands us, the ever-helpful Papala, hands us an invitation to the upcoming royal wedding in Facade. As it turns out, our 15-year-old prince, now king, is preparing to marry a 10-year-old girl named Fira, the deformed girl we met when we first went to the village. The now king accepted her even after seeing her true disfigured face, which is pretty romantic, I think. Now we get there and there's some deep conversation about the nature of love and romance and marriage, which we can gloss over because it's not sexy or violent, nor relevant to the larger plot. The wedding proceeds smoothly until a band of wolves, led by a shade that looks like a wolf, attack the wedding. And the shade immediately attacks and critically wounds Fira, and she dies.
Aww.
And of course, this makes the king rather upset, and he vows to wipe out the wolves. Because naturally in this game, anytime one member of one species does us wrong, we have to vow to wipe out the entire species, because that's what we do in these games.
It's just like real life.
Yeah, pretty much. One wolf did one bad thing to me, so now... Actually, it wasn't even a wolf, it was the shade who actually killed Fira.
Oh.
So he's not like, I'm going to wipe out all shades, he's like, I'm going to wipe out all wolves. Now, wolves do accompany the shade to attack the wedding, so it's not just the shade. But Fira dies, the king says, I'm going to wipe out all the wolves, so naturally we agree to help. So we trek out into the desert, and we kill a bunch of wolves, we destroy the wolf shade, and get the loyal Cerberus key fragment. And then later on, we learned that the wolf shade was the spirit of a wolf, or was the spirit of a dog whose owner sacrificed himself so that the wolf could continue on in spirit form, and all the master asked in return was that the wolf think about him now and again, which the wolf did until we killed it.
Aww. Is this the story of Sif?
Sort of. Loyal wolf and its master. The master sacrifices itself so that the dog can continue on. It kind of is. Yeah. It kind of is. And so the reason that the wolves attacked the wedding was that a party of soldiers from the village killed some wolves, so they were naturally upset about this and wanted to retaliate. So again, we feel like jerks once we learn what's really going on. But anyway, and so we get the key fragment, and then Gideon sends correspondence, perfect timing, stating that the blade is finished, because this is not an RPG after all, so these things don't tend to work out that way all the time. I'm kidding, they do. When we meet him, he asks us to avenge Jacob against a little shade and his robot. So naturally, we return to the junk heap and fight a giant robot called P39 and a small shade that's perched atop it, which appears to be giving it orders. But later we learn that they're both sentient, they're fast friends, and we're kind of jerks for coming in and killing them unprovoked.
Aww. Wow, this game is horrible.
And their only wish was that they could live together forever as friends. And we come in and just wreck their crap. So, but I think though in some of the expanded materials, we find that one of them managed to survive and see the outside world, which was their wish together. So we are total jerks, but at least one of them managed to survive and get away. But once we win, Gideon comes and starts pounding the wreckage of P39 maniacally, vowing to make terrible weapons to destroy all the machines, and we get the Law of Robotics key segment. So he's like, all right, crazy boy, you keep pounding the robot. We're just going to leave now. Thanks for the sword, because he gives us a cool new sword. Like, thanks for the sword. You just keep pounding that corpse and cackling. We'll see you later. So then we go to the Forest of Myth, where we confront Sleeping Beauty and experience 3 really cool short stories that maybe we can get into some other time. They provide a lot of good narrative context and flavor, and one might actually shed some background on Weiss's origins, because basically the grimoires were people who've been trapped inside books. That's the short of it. But here lately, though, Sleeping Beauty, even though it was created to remember everything, has been forgetting things. So it feels like it's losing its purpose, so we have to kind of try to help it remember. We find a shade stealing these little yellow crystals that we assume are memories, and so naturally we kill it or try to kill it.
Of course,
because that's what we
our
do.
Solution to everything.
Yep, that's what we do.
Well, do you want to go into like how this kind of articulates? Because what happens is you fight these bosses like without what Nick is saying, without the context. And then Sim will understand this because it's similar to what the game does with the 9S path. Where when you go back and fight them again, you get additional information.
That's right.
About what's going on, yeah.
And that's when you feel like a jerk.
Yeah.
Because in the second playthrough, which picks up, I think, at the library, you can kind of see things from Kaine's perspective. And as Nier, you can't understand what the shades are saying. You can't understand their language. But because Kaine is possessed by a shade, she can understand their language. And that is how you learn all this backstory.
Okay.
And that's when you feel like a real jerk. Yeah. And so that's how you acquire all the backstories. Because Kaine can understand what the shades are saying because she's got Tyran inside of her. And so because she's sort of part shade in a way, she has one inside her, she can understand what they're saying. So that's how you know that, for example, Gretel is saying, leave my friends alone, they're just children, they can't defend themselves.
Yeah.
Of course, we don't realize that, so we just slaughter them. Because they are just children. They're completely defenseless, yet we slaughter them because they're shades, and that's what we do. We kill shades.
It reminds me of the robot village from Nier Automata.
Yeah, Nier Automata, like, basically does a bunch of Nier over again in a slightly different way.
It does. Actually, a lot of the same themes and tropes are present in both games. A lot of the same ones.
Yeah.
And you'll wind up feeling very sorry for every boss you kill. Even Grun, the great big whale-like robot that comes out and threatens to wreck everything, you feel really sorry for him. But that's skipping way ahead. So that's a really powerful narrative device, and it's a way to give meaning to the second playthrough when you're kind of doing the same thing you've done before. You're doing different things, but overall the same thing. So after you sort of solve the problem with the tree, basically what happens is the shade wasn't some memory thief. It was actually either the tree itself or some sort of representation of it or some shade that it fused with it. But once it touches Nier, it reacts with joy and a little bit of sadness because it's now feeling emotions it's never felt before, and finding Nier was somehow the last event that was necessary to trigger its termination sequence, and so it shuts down. And it's relieved to finally be able to shut down. And so once that happens, you get the Tree of Memory key segment. And then you go back to the village, and the ever-helpful Popola introduces a letter purporting to be from the chief of the area village. Previously, the area village was really isolated and closed off to us. But now, according to this letter, they want to open up trade and welcome outsiders. So naturally, we go there. And I think area may be Kaine's native village, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think. But I don't guess it matters. Once we get there, though, we found out that the letter might be a sham, and everybody's acting really weird.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, the letter might be a sham. Everybody's acting strangely. Villagers are turning into shades and attacking you. And of course, we fight back. We fight back because we kill shades. Because Nier has vowed to kill all shades because the Shadow Lord is a shade, and the Shadow Lord took his daughter, therefore all shades are bad. That's everybody's reasoning in these games. Of course, we fight back. And of course, once again, Kaine is critically wounded because that's what happens. Now, the village shades that we kill eventually combine into this uber shade called Wendy. this big uber powerful shade, and it's Wendy. Why is it Wendy? I don't know. Its name is Wendy. This big uber crazy shade called Wendy who puts up a heck of a fight. But you fight it, and you're having trouble. But then Emil lets loose his living super weapon powers and destroys Wendy after a robust boss fight. But as a consequence, he let go a little bit too much. He loses control, and he essentially nukes the entire village.
Oh my god!
Killing innocent and shade alike.
Wow.
And naturally, Emir, being the sensitive soul he is somewhat distraught about this.
Yeah.
So he's crying, and now the way Nier reacts is a bit striking. Emil's like, oh, I killed everybody. I killed all these innocent people. What have I done? Ah! And Nier's like, but you saved our lives.
Aww.
And it's like, he just killed a village full of mostly innocent people, and you're like, but you saved our lives.
Well, listen, if he didn't, you'd have no game to play, so...
That's right.
Yeah.
And so Shades of Kime, the sort of homicidal maniac type or psychopath. Same psychopathic tendencies as our protagonist in. Well, I think what Richard said is spot on. Any protagonist in any RPG is going to have to be a little psychopathic because you're killing legions of people.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Like through the chaos mechanic, Dishonored tries to force you to acknowledge this too in a different way. So it's shades of that. But yeah. Nier's totally cool with it though because he didn't give a crap about anybody in the village anyway. As long as he's still alive, that's all that matters. So. But then, of course, we get the final key segment called Sacrifice. Get it? Because Emil just wiped out the whole village, and now we get the key segment, so its name is Sacrifice.
Yeah.
Complete coincidence.
Obviously.
And not at all meant for narrative flavor. So having fully assembled the key, we return to the Lost Shrine and open the gate to the Shadow Lord's castle. And according to Yoko Taro, we're actually transported way down underground and way back up again so that we're in a completely different place once we do that. But anyway, once we arrive at the Shadow Lord's castle, it's not this dark, dank, morbid place that we might think a guy called the Shadow Lord would be inhabiting. It's actually, we actually open up into a very nice courtyard.
Well, he had a very good decorator.
He did. I mean, the place is very bright and cheery and well maintained. I mean, it's a really nice place. Like, this is where the Shadow Lord lives? I expect to see bats and vampires and darkness.
Yeah, like a dungeon and skeletons.
I expect, Castlevania, not this majestic courtyard. Now, before we go, in another bit of foreshadowing, Papala expresses misgivings. Like, are you really sure you want to do this thing you've been trying to do the whole game? Because I don't know. And Nier's like, well, of course I do. That's what the whole game's been about. So that's what's been leading up to. If we didn't go, it'd be rather anticlimactic. It's like, okay, but are you really sure? So she expresses misgiving.
Right.
So that's another bit of foreshadowing. Now, once you get to the area, you initially progress by answering a series of questions posed to you by pigeons. I think they're mechanical pigeons. They talk to you, and you have to answer 3 riddles, each of which kind of hints toward the big reveal at the end. So once you answer the riddles, you progress. And the pigeons are kind of a nice callback to Drakengard 3 because at the end of, I think, Route A, you kind of turn all the disciples that you've acquired into pigeons because that's their original form. So you turn them into pigeons to liberate them from their service as disciples. So that's another callback to the Drakengard franchise, I think. But anyway, at the end of all this, Papala and Devila show up to oppose us. They've been helping us all along, but now all of a sudden, they oppose us.
Uh-oh.
As it turns out, they're in league with the Shadow Lord. And they call Weiss a traitor because he wasn't willing to join with Grimoire Noir and do whatever it is they wanted to do. So they take his powers. Because those powers were loaned to him, quote unquote. So they leave, and we progress further into the castle, and we fight a couple of boars, one of which looks very much like the armored boar in Dark Souls. They're shades, but they're taking the form of gigantic boars. We fight and kill one. The second one, called a goose, which of course a wild boar would be named Goose, is basically unkillable at this point, and he chases us further into the area. When all seems lost, somehow a band of soldiers from Facade, led by the king, show up to help us. It's like, wait a minute, we had to go on this big elaborate quest to get in here. How'd you guys get in here? It doesn't matter, it's a video game. Shut up. Okay. It's like we had to go on this big elaborate quest, and you guys just show up with a military contingent to help us fight this giant boar. So anyway, they show up and they distract Goose long enough for the door to shut behind us, and we move on. Later on, we learn that the king actually dies during this fight. Why the heck the king came himself is a mystery to me, but the king himself came with a contingent of soldiers, and I think they all died. So they keep Goose busy while we make our way further into the castle where Devila and Papala are. Here's where the big reveal comes. Here we learn that Devila and Papala are androids.
No!
Created to watch over the replicants until they can rejoin their Gestalt. Like, what the heck did you just say, Nick? Replicants and gestalts? What the heck are you talking about?
Mhm.
Well, here's the big reveal. By studying the grimoires, humans found a way to separate their souls from their bodies. The key to that was Grimoire Noir, and so they mass-produced copies of Grimoire Noir to enable humans to separate their souls from their bodies. This was a means to preserve the human race, because basically the Gestalt is a disembodied human soul, also known as a shade. So we found out that the shades we've been fighting this whole time are Gestalt's disembodied human souls. And basically every quote-unquote human character we encounter, with the exception of Devil and Popula, is a replicant. And the replicants are mass-produced cloned bodies that, once we finally found a way to contain the white chlorination syndrome, well, to back up, Project Gestalt, here's the plan in a nutshell.
Okay. I'll just, you were talking about the pigeon questions before.
Yes.
Okay, the way the pigeon questions foreshadow this is that as you go through the Shadow Lord's castle, there are these pigeons that you talk to, and they ask you questions. And Nier's response to all of them is, how the fuck am I supposed to know the answer to this? I don't know. Right.
Right.
The answer is that Grimoire Vice knows it, but it's multiple choice. So what the game does is it just makes you go through multiple choice questions it kind of knows you don't know the answer to until you pick the right one. That's how it does the reveal. So the questions are like, what went wrong with humanity, which was the white chlorination disease? And then it says, okay, so how will humans survive? And you have to go through all the answers so you pick the right one, which is by separating their souls from their bodies.
That's right.
And then the one after that is, well, what happens next? And the correct answer is, we have to place each soul in its corresponding shell.
That's right.
So the replicants, the people that you've been playing as the whole game, are the shells.
That's right. You're not playing as the original Nier. You're not playing it, and it's not the original Yona. They're replicants.
Mm-hmm. So that explains they're not aging and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole operation is called Project Gestalt, and the essential idea of it is that we're going to separate our souls from our bodies until such a time as we can get a handle on the Legion and the white chlorination syndrome. Once that's done, we've got these mass-produced bodies called replicants that we can put into which we can fuse our souls and regain our bodies, right? That was the idea.
Yeah.
So we're essentially taking a temporary leave of absence from our bodies until we can get the white chlorination syndrome under control, because it had humankind on the brink of extinction, and this was kind of a last-ditch effort to preserve the human race. Something went wrong, though. No surprise. Is that the replicants themselves started to become self-aware and sentient. And the short answer is this meant that the Gestalts could not refuse with their human bodies, but that's not strictly true. Because the Shadow Lord does cause Yona's Gestalt to fuse with her replicant, even though her replicant is self-aware, but it's not a good solution. It doesn't end well. It's not viable long-term for a Gestalt to remain inside a replicant that has itself become self-aware. So it leads to bad things. Now, when they first started doing this, when they first started separating souls from bodies, the disembodied spirits, the Gestalts, would go insane.
Okay.
And so at the beginning, they were looking for one human who could endure the process and not have his Gestalt go insane. And the code name for this being was the original Gestalt, right?
The OG.
Yeah, the OG, exactly. The original gangsta Gestalt. And so here's how they found the original Gestalt. Operating, under the cover of a charitable organization, I think the Hamlin organization, which was in charge of Project Gestalt, set up these charitable distribution centers. Because food was scarce, people would flock there for food. And when the people came there, they would essentially perform the separation on these people. And they would keep going insane, and the first one who didn't go insane would be the original Gestalt, and that would later form the basis to refine the separation process to the point where we could do it without the shade or the Gestalt going insane. And so Nier went to one of these facilities, but he saw what was happening, that these people were being separated from their bodies and going mad, so he got the heck up out of there.
Okay.
He's like, I don't want none of this. But in the intro, when he touches Grimoire Noir to gain the power to fight off the shades and save his daughter, that's when the separation occurs, right? In the intro. And he does not go insane. So Nier is the original Gestalt. The Nier you play as for most of the game is his replicant. And the Shadow Lord is Nier's Gestalt.
Oh my god, what a plot twist!
Dun dun dun.
Well, we should point out that the Shadow Lord looks exactly like Nier. So
Exactly.
it's not that much of a plot twist.
Well, I think we actually did discuss that.
Yeah, we did
Yeah.
discuss that, yeah.
It's like he bears a striking resemblance to our intrepid protagonist. So the reason the Shadow Lord took Yona was because he wanted to put Yona's Gestalt inside her body.
Oh.
Because one symptom, so now the process can be performed without the Gestalts inevitably going insane.
Mhm.
But some Gestalts or shades still do go insane.
Mhm.
And when that happens, the corresponding replicant is afflicted with the Black Scroll.
Mhm.
And that's eventually fatal. So I think the way it went was that the Hamlet organization actually put Yona's Gestalt in stasis for a while so that the process wouldn't fully consummate.
Mhm.
To await such a time that they could find a cure and put her back in her replicant safely without her going, bat-turd crazy.
Mhm.
Of course, that promise was never fulfilled, so the Shadow Lord / Nier decided to take matters into his own hands. So
Right.
he procured Yona's Gestalt. Of course, in the library, he appears and takes her replicant from us.
Mhm.
And he does actually manage to place her Gestalt inside her replicant. But like I said, it doesn't work out well because once she's revived, the Gestalt says, you know what, I can't stay in this body. This belongs to someone else. I don't like it.
Aw.
So she just leaves and sort of disappears into the sunlight.
Aw.
But before that, though, we have a boss fight with Devil and Papala, and both wind up dead.
Aw.
Now, it appears as though Emil sacrifices himself to destroy Papala, who's
Mhm.
angry over her sister's death. But later
Mhm.
we come to find out that Emir, of course, survives.
Okay.
So after that, we have the final confrontation with the Shadow Lord, big boss fight. And after a moment's hesitation, we destroy the Shadow Lord. And this is the event that leads to the final extinction of the human race.
Oh no.
When we destroy the Shadow Lord, because again, every stable Gestalt that has been produced is linked to the Shadow Lord because he was the original template for producing a stable Gestalt, right? So they're all sort of linked to him. And so now that he's been destroyed, every shade in existence is going to go insane. And the term they use for that in the game is relapse.
Mhm.
They're going to go insane. And remember when that happens, the corresponding replicant is afflicted with the Black Scroll. So
Mhm.
every shade is going to relapse, which means every existing replicant is going to get the Black Scroll, which means basically everything is wiped out, except for the androids that have been created. Because
Mhm.
before humankind sort of did all this, they created a bunch of androids for various reasons, and those androids are the premise, or sort of the establishment of Nier Automata way on down the line.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we've been producing replicants, gestalts, and androids, and Devil and Papala again are androids. Their purpose was to watch over the replicants. They're not unique. It's like they're the Devil and Papala models, and basically each village has a Devil and a Papala to sort of oversee and take care of the replicants until such a time as the gestalts can be reunited. But because the replicants are becoming self-aware, that's really never going to happen.
Mhm.
But Replicant Nier made sure of it when he destroyed the Shadow Lord, because now all the gestalts are going to relapse, all the replicants are going to come down with the Black Scroll. So Project Gestalt is a final and utter failure.
Aw.
And so the human race is done
Hmm.
at this point, totally extinct,
Mhm.
which is a big reveal in Nier Automata because it's inconsistent with the premise that humans are hiding on the moon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a big reveal to me. I knew they were lying to me.
Right. If you played Nier, you know that's a false.
No, I knew
premise.
without playing Nier.
Well, that's because you're the best in the
Yeah.
world at predicting content.
Thank you. It's nice to be
Yeah.
appreciated, unlike with Richard.
And so that's, and basically, I'm not sure you need to know much after that to really understand the foundation for Nier Automata, because explains why the human race is extinct.
Mhm.
But there's some other stuff, like you play through again from the library, and you see things from Kaine's perspective. And that's why we feel guilty about everything we've done.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's like I said, that's the equivalent of the 9S playthrough.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, where because in the 9S one does it by you hack into things and you learn about them. With Kaine, she can just understand shades.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
And 9S, because he can hack the machines, is able to empathize with them, and that's another
Mhm.
device to reveal some more backstory that we
Yeah.
didn't get as 2B. I see 9S as the most important character in that game. 2B is the fan favorite, but really it kind of all centers around 9S.
No,
I think once
we stand for 9S.
Yeah, exactly.
He prefers to be called Nines.
Nines, that's right. You can just call me Nines, and 2B is all 9S will suffice.
Yeah.
Emotions are prohibited. Blah blah blah. Of course, that's a front because she actually cares deeply about 9S, even though she kills him over and over again. But that's for another day. But of course, there are different endings. That's what we just talked about is ending A, and at the end of that, Shadow Lord and Yona's Gestalts are reunited in what appears to be some sort of heavenly afterlife. And it's either at the end of this one or maybe after Route B. Again, we see things from a different perspective, and we learn that Emil is alive in the desert somewhere. He's just rolling around. He's just the head now. He doesn't have his body.
Yeah, the body blows off, and he's just the head.
Yeah, rolling around, and that's how we see him later on in Nier Automata. Or at least a clone of him, but that's a different story. But to sort of complete the lead into Nier Automata, I guess kind of have to talk a little bit about the alien invasion. Sometime after the final failure of Project Gestalt, aliens invade the planet in absolutely overwhelming force, primarily by way of these machine life forms. They're these sort of sentient machines that are essentially the entire military apparatus of the invading alien force. Emil vows to fight against the aliens, and so he produces 85 million clones of himself to fight the aliens.
Yeah,
intense.
But now, despite that, and despite the efforts of the androids, the machines still wind up essentially taking over the Earth, and the androids have to build a satellite base orbiting the Earth from which to conduct their operations, and thus begins the eons-long war with the machines to reassert dominance over the Earth. And that's the basic premise for Nier Automata. So, it all stems from this alien invasion that takes place well after the events of Nier.
Should we talk about how, Nier himself is erased from history?
Oh, that's right.
That's
That's important, yes.
Yeah, okay. So Nier, again, has a bunch of different endings.
Yep.
And
I think this is ending C, right? Where you
this is basically, if you go through the game and do a bunch of pointless bullshit, you unlock you basically have to platinum the game. You have to get 100% of everything. That unlocks an option at the end where Kaine is dying or dead. I can't remember exactly what. And you are Nier, and there's Grimoire Vice is like, hey, I just discovered a plot device where Yona and Kaine can survive, but you will be erased from history.
Oh, that's what you have the option to kill her and set her free from Tyran, or
she asks you to kill her.
Yeah. But there's another option. You can sacrifice yourself and cure her, but as a consequence, Nier is completely erased from existence, as is your save file.
Yeah, it's the same as ending E in Automata. So you watch your save file get deleted.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a test. It's not a joke. Your save file is deleted.
And this is why in Automata there's no direct references to Nier himself, because he never existed.
Yeah. At most, you get cryptic references to the man.
Yeah, you get the man or my friend or something. But
yeah.
Because
Nier was sort of there was. I guess the canon is that Nier chose to erase himself from existence to save Kaine.
Yeah.
And then that's and that's what explains. That's why you never see the name Nier at all. You see unending callbacks to Nier, but the name Nier is not mentioned because he's been erased from existence. There's just these vague references to him. I think in one of the short stories, the party is somehow reunited with him, even though he's been erased from existence. But that's another matter. Because there's a short story where somehow the tree of memory resurges itself, and it wants to essentially erase all the replicants' memories or something. And Kaine and Emil band together to stop that, and in the process, they somehow come across Nier, even though he's been erased from existence. So it's really weird. But yeah, then the alien invasion happens, and Emil makes all these clones of himself, but most of them are lost to the war, unfortunately. And so Emil's sort of one of the clones of Emil is sort of running around, and that's the Emil we encounter in Nier Automata. It's one of the clones. It's not the original Emil, I don't think. Because you ask, what's happened to the original Emil, and he says, I don't know. So that could be the original Emil, but it may not be, because as a consequence of Emil replicating himself so many times, his memories are sort of lost in the process. And so on one of the side quests in Nier Automata, you sort of help him recover some of his memories by finding these lunar tears that are scattered about the world, which is kind of cool. Very sentimental. Of course, I platinumed the game, so naturally I did that. And I chose to erase my save file in ending E before I platinumed the game, so naturally I did that twice. I'm like, wait a minute, I should have waited to do this until after I got the platinum. Because now I got to go through ending E again. Which is the most hellish bullet hell game ever created, but that's a topic for another day, I guess. But yeah, so we've got that. Nier's been erased from existence, and the aliens invade, and Emil unsuccessfully creates 85 million clones of himself to fight them, and they still wind up taking over the Earth and the remaining androids. Some androids remain on the surface of the Earth to fight the machines. Other androids form an elite unit called Yorha, operating out of an orbiting base to fight the machines, and that's the basic premise for Nier Automata.
Yay!
We got there. Phew, I hope that made sense, because I feel like I went really fast and glossed over a lot.
Well, that was 2 hours almost on the dot. So.
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess next time we can actually go through Nier Automata.
Yeah.
Yay! Finally, we're doing Nier. Some people are gonna be so happy.
But yeah, this is everything you don't need to know to understand Nier Automata.
Yeah.
Yeah, because people have been asking us to cover Nier, so there we go.
We did, phew. Right, well, like I said, I hope that made sense, because when I was preparing for this, I honestly felt like I was studying for a law exam. Because there's so much to it. It's like I would be up to like 3 in the morning, my head spinning with all the legal knowledge, the night before an exam. And this felt this way once I was done. Because as Richard knows, there's a lot to it. Yeah.
Yeah, this podcast is much more intense than law school.
Absolutely. And we didn't even get into all the branching multiverses and alternate timelines and stuff.
Well, finally, Richie can go to sleep. Richie, do the outro.
That was Drakengard and Drakengard 3 and Nier Gestalt and Nier Replicant.
Yep.
And we hope you were able to follow it.
Yep.
Statistically, most of you who've played Nier Automata haven't played these. And they're not really relevant to Automata, but stick around because we'll do Automata next time.
Yes, we will.
Yeah.
Everything you don't need to know.
Alright, well, thank you so much, Nick. Where can people find you on social media?
Oh, shoot, yeah. I have a Twitter under Cinder Thief, a Twitch under Cinder Thief, and a YouTube channel under that same name.
Cinder is with a Y.
Yep, Cinder is with a Y, because
Yeah.
I was trying to be cool and didn't realize that that's the name of one of the characters in the Spyro franchise. So,
Yeah. You can just say you predicted Spyro franchise retroactively.
I retroactively predicted it, yes.
Yeah.
Because we have a talent for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, yeah. We do streaming and gameplay videos and stuff like that. And I'm trying to think of some original stuff to do, like in terms of lore, or maybe work in some kind of legal angle. But I haven't quite decided what to do in that regard yet.
You could do Ace Attorney.
Ace Attorney. Heck yeah, I could do the lore on Ace Attorney. That'd be perfect. This is nothing like the actual practice of law.
Oh my god, yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, Phoenix Wright, lore confirmed. Phoenix Wright is Lawrence, but anyway.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Richie.
Thank you.
And we'll see each other next time.
Yep.
We certainly will.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.